Welcome to Movies Are Spiritual. Today we're going to be talking about the spiritual themes found in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I feel a great disturbance in the Force.
As I watched Star Wars Phantom Menace this time, I started to think there's a lot of stuff in this film that's inspired by religion, like different religions, right? It seemed obvious to me watching it as an adult. Do you think that was just coincidence, or is there something to this film? Like, is there supposed to be a religious vibe to Phantom Menace?
I think absolutely there is a religious vibe. With the history of Star Wars, when George Lucas was writing the original Star Wars, he started writing that thing in like 72, 73. He had studied a lot of different religions to come up with the idea of the Force, Jedi, Sith, all of that. And I think with Phantom Menace, there's definitely that parallel, especially to Jesus. I mean, he's mentioned who's the boy's father. And his mother says, well, he had no father. I conceived him. I gave birth to him. Can't explain it. And they find out later that he was conceived by the Force. And if that's not a direct parallel to the birth of Christ, I mean, you can't get any closer than that.
Yeah, plus it's a great story, and who's the dad? You don't know what's going on, so I think he just kind of took from that along with, a bunch of other stuff throughout the entire, 6 stories that he did. So there was probably a lot of religious elements here and there. I know he had a lot of, or was inspired by, just talking about Seventh Samurai?
Seventh Samurai, yeah.
Maybe. I know it's a samurai movie. I do apologize if I'm messing that up. But yeah, and just like most directors, you get inspired by something, you take a little bit here, you take a little bit here, you weave it together, you got a cool story.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking when we got to that part about the virgin birth, about Anakin being a virgin conception. I was like, whoa, like I didn't catch that line as a kid, and I thought that was strange. Now, I know that George Lucas commented that it's not necessarily Jesus, he was inspired by mythology, and I know Caesar, who was alive at the time of Jesus's birth, like he claimed to be conceived by the Roman gods. So he claimed to have a virgin birth. But they've also got this element of prophecy in here, this prophecy about a Messiah. And I don't remember any prophecy in Greek mythology and Roman mythology. That seems to be something from Judaism, which, people will look at this film and they'll say, oh, no, that's not Christianity. That's not in there. This was inspired by Eastern religions. Well, Judaism is an Eastern religion. That came out of there, and then Christianity came out of that. So if you pair virgin birth and the whole prophecy about Anakin together and throw the Force in there, I do think it's a mix of things, but he had to have some inspiration from Jesus for the story, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I kind of noticed that too. When this movie came out in 1999, I got so excited because it was a new Star Wars movie that I just absolutely could not wait. I was there at the midnight showing on opening night. I went later that day. In all, I saw this movie 9 times when it first came out. And I still have a couple of the ticket stubs upstairs. I don't know how I still have them, but I do. So I think by the 9th time I had watched it, I had pretty much all the dialogue pretty much memorized. So I was picking up new stuff every time I saw it. The first time I was just in amazement of all the stuff going on. But that was one thing that did stick out to me immediately when she said, there was no father. I was like, wow, okay, that's pretty interesting. Where are they going to go with this? Yeah, I kind of came out of nowhere because that was not what I was expecting in this movie when I first saw it.
Yeah, Darth Vader having an immaculate conception.
Yeah, I mean, he that, and then how he was conceived by the midichlorians, which we'll get into that later. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of interesting, and they talked about the prophecy of the chosen one. He's going to bring balance to the Force. And again, that's kind of a same parallel with Jesus. You've got the chosen one who's going to come and save all of us, which is what Christ did when he died on the cross. That was his purpose. So it was a little heavier religious theme than, the original trilogy. You really didn't see a whole lot of that in the originals.
Why do you think he put all this in there? I mean, was he exploring religion, or what does he want the audience to take away by studying this subject or seeing this in the film? I mean, is it just something that he thought was cool, or was there something he was exploring or something he wanted to say to put these religious ideas in the film?
Well, I think the reason he did the Immaculate Conception was Anakin was the chosen one. You know, he was the one who was going to bring balance to the Force. That's why Qui-Gon Jinn fought for him so adamantly. So he needed something to portray Anakin to be the one, you know, the most popular, the one out there currently still is Jesus, I would assume. I mean, even if you're not a believer, you know who Jesus is.
Yeah.
So yeah, going with his story, taking, you know, just the Immaculate Conception makes Anakin the chosen one.
Yeah, I agree with Doug. I think had he just found him, and who's his father? Oh, his father is Bill, who works in town, and it doesn't really make him like special. But by saying he had no father, he was. This is how it happened. It definitely ties into, oh, hey, then this might be him, because that this doesn't happen. He's got to be special. So I think that's kind of probably where he was going with that. But I do know that George Lucas is real big into like mythology and the study of religions and stuff like that. So, he probably just saw that as, here's a good opportunity. I could do it this way to have it make
Well,
sense.
an additional piece too is Anakin has unusual abilities. He can manipulate the Force. So I kind of looked at that like Jesus performing the miracles. So
Mm-hmm.
there are several things that make it look like he is supposed to be some kind of Jesus figure. It's just interesting where they go with the character. Now, I'm going to say this as a Star Wars fan before I say this. I am a big Star Wars fan. I loved the movies and the video games as a kid. But I started thinking about this. Okay, Anakin's supposed to bring balance to the Force. I started thinking about that. Things are pretty good at this point, relatively, right? And
Yeah.
then they're going to get bad when he becomes Darth Vader later. So I started wondering, wait, is the Force too good in this movie? And they have to balance it out by bringing in some kind of bad Jedi? Like, isn't that a bad idea?
Yeah. The whole balance to the Force thing. I mean, I am a Star Wars geek. I read everything. I've read novels. I read the books. Everything. That has still always kind of bothered me. This bringing balance to the Force. What exactly does it mean? Does it mean that this guy has to be part good, part bad to balance it out? Because if there's no Sith and it's just Jedi, the Force isn't balanced, right? It's too far this way, or it's going to be too far this way. So I never really understood what he meant by he's going to bring balance. Is that because he's going to kill some Sith and then become a? I don't know.
Do they even know about Sith at this point?
Well, they do know about Sith, but they haven't had any Sith around for, they said, for a millennia. They've been gone and wiped out, and they thought that, well, if a Sith is going to return, we would know about it. But the dark side being around is clouding all of their vision, so they can't see it. Because I mean, Palpatine is right there in front of them the whole time, and they can't pick up on the fact that he's a Sith.
So they sense the disturbance, and that Anakin might, they think, balance that out. They don't know where it's actually going to go.
Well, I think Qui-Gon's the only one who thinks he is the one, and then Obi-Wan just because Qui-Gon's dead.
Yeah, I think Obi-Wan trained him just because Qui-Gon was dying and said, train him. And he's like, well, okay. But yeah, I think Qui-Gon was the only one who was like, this is him.
Another way to look at it is if you just look at the Lucas saga, the first 6, he did bring balance to the Force because he broke the chains of the Sith, killed the last Sith, and then the Force was balanced. It was back to good again. And then Mickey Mouse came and crapped all over it. But I mean, the next movies came out.
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
So anyway, basically, and yeah, I mean, unfortunately, if you just look at the first 6, it makes sense.
Yeah. Now, the whole overall story
went with 7, 8, and 9, and there are some positive things in those movies. We'll get to them, but they did just kind of forget the old story, and it's just like, okay, well, the bad force is back again, and
so Qui-Gon was right. It just got really bad first.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I think had Qui-Gon not died, I think Anakin would have had a different outcome because Anakin was
Interesting.
his father figure and he was really in tune with that stuff. And I think that he would have been able to keep Anakin in check. Because keep in mind, Obi-Wan, when he took over training Anakin, was only like 25 years old. So he was still a pretty young guy. So they were more like brothers than father-son.
You mean Obi-Wan was only 25?
Obi-Wan was only like 25 in The Phantom Menace.
How old was Anakin?
9.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And that was the also dangerous part that Yoda had said is he's too old to begin training because by this point he's already got attachments. He's already kind of set in certain ways, and it could be very dangerous to start training him at this point. But no one listens to Yoda. Qui-Gon's like, forget you if we're doing this anyway.
Well, on the subject of Anakin, let's move into my second question about him. This time when I was watching Phantom Menace, I thought in this Star Wars movie, Anakin seems like not just a Jesus figure, but a dark Jesus figure. So we talked about he had the virgin birth. There's these prophecies about him. He's got an unusual ability to manipulate the Force, which you might view as like an impersonal form of God or something. But yeah, I thought his story arc looks like Jesus if things went wrong with Jesus. So, for instance, at the beginning of Jesus' story, right after he's baptized, he goes out in the wilderness and he's tempted by Satan for 40 days, right? That's supposed to represent him conquering the things that the Israelites had failed at, right? They were tempted in the wilderness by Satan and they lost that battle. So here comes Jesus and he does the same thing, but this time he wins that battle. He doesn't give into the temptation. And then he goes on and he's the Messiah, right? But Anakin, in his story arc, kind of going into the next movie, like they're setting him up like he's going to be this Messiah figure, but then he's going to end up losing that battle that of temptation when he experiences a loss. So, do you think this prequel trilogy is about Anakin being a dark Jesus or like a what if Jesus had like turned out wrong or something like that until the very end?
I don't know if I've ever thought about it that way. When you see episodes 1, 2, and 3 together, and you see his entire life, how he struggles with doing the right thing, and like you said, giving into that temptation, whether it's falling in love, getting revenge because of something that's happened to him, which he knows is I'm not supposed to be doing, but I do it anyway. So he's got a real struggle with that. So I mean, I guess if you looked at it from a certain way, you could think like, well, what had Jesus if he had struggled with this temptation and given into it? How would things have turned out? And yeah, I guess it would have turned out the way it turned out for Anakin, which is not good.
Yeah, that's the way I was looking at it. 'Cause when they're talking about, oh, he's the chosen one and all this, and we know where the story goes. I almost wish I
Yeah.
could watch the Star Wars movies from Episode 1 without knowing the story, because
Oh, without knowing.
knowing the end, I'm like, no, don't do it, don't do it.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I guess you could see that and that's why I said, like, if he didn't have the attachment to his mom, if his mom had still survived, if Qui-Gon had survived, if Padme hadn't died, all this stuff hadn't happened, he could have been the one that they thought he was going to be, this savior. But unfortunately, he would give into all those temptations, and he just couldn't help it.
He's evil space Jesus.
Space Jesus. And one other thing to tie in with this, we're talking about like, with religions and stuff, and we're talking about, Anakin having this Jesus type figure. Think of who I guess he's not the main bad guy, but Darth Maul being in this. I mean, he looks like the devil. So it's like you
he's got
have,
horns.
yeah, I mean, he's red, black. He looks like what you would picture the devil looking like. So, I wish they would have done more with him.
I know.
Yeah,
man.
they came back with him in the cartoon.
He keeps coming. Somehow Darth Maul keeps coming back. No one's ever truly dead in Star Wars.
Yeah, I will tell you, it would have been really interesting what you said if they had depicted him more as some kind of Satan figure. Like, what if he had played a role in Anakin turning dark, right?
Mm-hmm.
But instead, I think he was an awesome character whom they didn't really set up real well, because this whole time he's hunting them, and we see him kind of run into them, and we see a little bit of how dangerous he is, but just barely. I would have felt a lot more tension if they'd set him up more as a threat somehow and shown
Yeah.
how scary he should be. Because the whole movie this time I was like, I know they're going to have this big fight at the end, but I'm not feeling tension because I'm not sure if he's really that big of a threat or not. I mean, there's two Jedi, two
Mhm.
Jedi and Anakin against one. Like, what's this guy going to do? And he turns out to be an awesome fighter. But they could have played with that tension because they've got Anakin as their Jesus figure, and they could have done something more with Darth Maul on a spiritual sense there.
Yeah.
I think it would have been cool to let him kill Qui-Gon, and as Obi-Wan is trapped, he just kind of smiles and disappears.
Yeah, escapes
Because I mean, all this stuff about who's the baddest Jedi, who's the most powerful, and everything like that. I mean, Obi-Wan just kills everyone. I mean, he takes out Maul. He takes out the
Grievous
arm dude, Grievous. Thank you. He takes out Vader multiple times now because of the Obi-Wan TV show. In the cartoon, he takes out Maul again.
Yeah, he did.
It's like this dude does not. The only time he's ever lost is when he just stood there and did this.
Right.
So it's maybe you can count the first time with Dooku, but I think they made him a little bit too powerful. I think Maul coming back in the second one, and then Anakin killing him just straight up. He had a chance. Maybe he was giving up. He didn't have a weapon, and Anakin just walks up and straight up kills him because he killed Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
So
they kind of did that.
That's where the dark side starts. It was the first turn.
They kind of did that in episode 3 when Anakin killed Dooku because Palpatine tells him, you wanted revenge for him killing, he cut off your arm. You wanted revenge. And he gave into it. And yeah, you're right. Had they done that in episode 2, where Anakin's older, comes across Darth Maul and basically executes him, and that would have been really good.
That would have made Attack of the Clones a much better movie.
It would have made it a whole much, yeah. That's the next one we'll be doing, and I don't have a whole lot to say about that.
Yeah. I'm interested to revisit it. That's all I'll say.
It's rough.
So I do have another question. On a philosophical level in the Star Wars universe, do you think free will exists? Because in Phantom Menace, there's all this talk about destiny and this was meant to happen, or Anakin was meant to help you. Qui-Gon says nothing happens by accident. There's all this talk about destiny and fate. Is there some kind of message here about our world, or is Star Wars like a predestination universe? What's going on here?
They make it seem that way. I think it depends on who you are. If you're in the Jedi, I think you believe in destiny. You believe in there's a certain way of life, and this is what the Force wills you to do. The Force is like it'd be like our praying to God or whatever. They always say, trust in the Force. The Force will guide you. The Force will lead the way. I think if you're just a commoner who is moisture farming on Tatooine, I don't think you believe in destiny and all that stuff as much. Because if my destiny is to sit out here in a 150-degree planet and try to soak water out of the ground, then,
my destiny
sucks. So, but yeah, the Force and Jedi, even the Sith, I mean, they really do trust in that, and they believe in the Force is guiding their way. So I don't know how much free will they actually have, because they even tell you can't have attachments, you can't get married, you can't have children, you can't fall in love, you can't do any of this stuff. You have to give your entire life to the Force and let it guide you.
We call those Catholic priests.
Yeah.
I mean, it could almost be a cult,
Well, it is interesting because I was trying to figure out, like, do they believe everything is predetermined and you don't really have choice? Or is the Force is all this talk just kind of talking about a sense of purpose? Because, this debate takes place within Christianity too. I would say most people probably believe in free will. I mean, that's where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a segment of Christianity, are basically called Calvinism or Reformation. If you hear like Reformed theology, that's what that is. And within that, there's like two levels of predestination or kind of determinism, right? One has an explanation for free will. They just kind of word it different. So they're kind of free will people, but it's kind of called like soft Calvinism. Well, then there's hard Calvinism where you really don't have choice. Like everything is predetermined by God. And I almost felt like that's how the script was written in Phantom Menace. And so I found that a little bit peculiar. I always feel like if that's the case, then why do we do what we do? If you don't you think that you have a choice, but it's an illusion. And I was just trying to figure out what George Lucas was trying to say. Was it just something he was studying and he put in this film, or what am I supposed to take away from it?
Yeah.
I mean, you can take a lot of things away from it. However, again, this is what we do. We take movies that may not be exactly a religious movie and try to find religious themes or at least positive themes in it. So, yeah, you can look at this and be like, this kind of looks like this, kind of looks like this. Or you could just say it is a fantasy movie, and how many fantasy movies, how many TV shows, how many whatevers have had a destiny, it's been foretold that this is happening, So it's not the first time someone's used something like this, but you can always take something spiritual out of it.
Yeah, is he trying to say life has a bigger purpose? I mean, is that kind of the point? You see him, you see Qui-Gon mentoring Anakin, and you see people investing in other characters. So, is this a way to try to say there's a bigger purpose to life? Is that why you think he put that in there?
It's very possible, I mean, that's the way to break the chain, is to, or just to change things up, whether it be change with the times or see something differently. Again, we've talked about in the past, one person can read the Bible and see this, where the other person can read the Bible and see this, completely different. So maybe it is a story about that. It's like, look, you're reading into this whole Jedi thing, paper towel rolls over your eyes. You're not seeing the full picture. And Qui-Gon kind of sees that, and using the chosen one, he's trying to open the eyes of everyone else. And I think opening the eyes of everyone else kind of, threw a wrench into a few things, but maybe that wrench needed to happen because, and then, if you go along with what's going on in The Mandalorian now, Luke gave Grogu or Baby Yoda the option in season 2.
It was Book of Boba Fett, actually.
Oh, it's the Book of Boba Fett. That's
Yeah.
right. And he's like, you have the option where, maybe back in the day when they find a baby with Jedi powers, it's like, all right, hey, look over there, and run away. Maybe, and you just never see the baby again. No choice. This thing's going to be a Jedi. So,
Yeah.
That's
maybe
all it
that's
knows. One track mind.
yeah.
And I mean, Doug's really right on with this. They make some references in Phantom Menace about Qui-Gon's defiance and how the council wants a certain way, and the reason he's not on the council is because he sees things differently. He values like all this different life, and he looks at all these different ways of living. And because he kind of strays away from what the Jedi Council thinks is the norm or the Jedi norm, they won't put him on the council. So he's in tune with, he knew Anakin was special. He could sense that something's not right around. He sensed the Sith, and they still didn't believe him. And it turns out all along he was actually right on with what, because he was more open to other things around him. He wasn't so closed minded as I think some of the Jedi were.
Yeah, I was trying to wrestle this whole film with, should I be for what Qui-Gon's trying to do, knowing what's going to happen? Like, was Qui-Gon wrong? But I like your theory of he was probably right. He just needed to be around to be the one
Yeah.
mentoring Anakin, and he died.
Because he wasn't there. No, because no one else believed in Anakin. No one else believed that this kid's the chosen one, and I don't think anybody really wanted to deal with it. And it even went as far as episode 3. Is he the chosen one? And Yoda said, "Well, you know what? Maybe we misread the prophecy. Maybe this isn't
Well,
right."
if you don't
So
believe in somebody, that can really harm them
yeah,
and change the trajectory of their life because they didn't feel like people were behind them.
hmm
I mean, they could have some animosity, and that's kind of what happens to.
yeah, they didn't trust him, and I mean Mace Windu had said that several times. I don't trust him. I think he's got too much anger. So there was just a lot of things stacked up against Anakin, and no one really gave him that chance. Like nobody really wanted to nurture him and let him, grow. I think they were all kind of afraid of him in a way.
So it's a metaphor for, nobody really wants to help traumatized people or kids because it is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a slave child, so
Yeah,
he's probably traumatized. He's left his mom as a slave on his home planet.
yeah,
So I could see that now because, like, who really wants to be a counselor of troubled kids these days? I mean, we think, well, that is a really important job. It's
yeah.
also a really hard job. That's why people don't want to do it. So we see that in this movie. People don't want to help Anakin because of the trauma he brings to the table, the anger, but they could help him deal with that, and then maybe
Mm-hmm.
his life would turn out different.
Yeah. Had Qui-Gon stuck around, and Obi-Wan to an extent as they got older started to actually try to do that. But Obi-Wan again was very set in the Jedi way. This is the way it is. And I read somewhere like that, like, the whole relationship between Anakin and Padme, Obi-Wan knew it was happening, but he never said anything, but he knew he was getting attached. He knew that he was, and he didn't stop it. He kind of let it go, which he probably should have. If you're stuck in the Jedi way, that's not right. You can't do that. So he did kind of stray off of that a little bit, but yeah, Anakin didn't have the support system that he really should have had, and he didn't get it. There was one thing that, if you take anything away from episode 8, it was this one scene that I actually, there's 2 scenes in it. It's actually really good. But Luke was talking to Rey about why the Jedi need to end. And he says it's because they're so arrogant and they're so blinded in their ways that during the height of their power, they allowed Darth Sidious to come back. They allowed Darth Vader to develop. They all got slaughtered and eliminated because they were so arrogant and so blinded about this is how things have got to be done that they refused to look outside and accept anything else could possibly happen. And that was their downfall. And that's why he said the Jedi need to end, which I thought that was pretty well. That was like one of the only parts of episode 8 that I really liked. But but when you see the whole movies, you actually see that, it's right there in front of your face and you guys are just ignoring it.
Well, I noticed Obi-Wan is going to become a lot more like Qui-Gon Jinn by the original trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
because you know how Qui-Gon wanted to take on Anakin even though he was supposedly too old to become a Jedi.
Yeah.
Well, Obi-Wan's going to take on Luke Skywalker in episode 4, and Luke's way too old.
He was
Anakin's
19.
too
Hey,
old. Yeah.
Luke is
So
way too old.
now
Too old to become a
now
Jedi.
he's not following the council rules and he's making his own decisions,
I
just
think at
like
that,
his
but
mentor did.
yeah, but at that point though, there are no Jedi around, so it's like I really don't have to follow that
Take
code
what we can
anymore.
get.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you watch the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that was on Disney Plus at the beginning, Obi-Wan is not interested in starting Jedi back up again. He was there just to make sure Luke survived, but he wanted no part of the Jedi. He'd run across a Jedi and he'd tell him, "Go take your lightsaber and bury it in the sand and be quiet. You don't know me. I don't know you. We're not doing this." I mean, he cut himself off from the Force completely. That he had to like relearn how to use it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Like a faith crisis.
yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much.
He was done. He's like, and he just shut himself off completely. Just he had to relearn how to pull a lightsaber to him. He couldn't. He was sitting on the ship trying to pull a lightsaber to him, and he couldn't do it because he hadn't done it in so long. Yeah, I don't know. The Jedi were kind of blind, and because they were so set in their ways of this is how the Force is going to help us and lead us along, and they refused to look outside and the possibility that other things could happen if you're so focused on this and not over here.
And that could be potentially a metaphor for like what can go wrong in organized religion at times.
Absolutely.
I could see that. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's something George Lucas was trying to comment on, but and I'm not necessarily against, like, I like, maybe the Jedi Council doesn't need to be scrapped, but they need to change if they're gonna continue, right?
Yeah.
And I'll look at organized religion the same way. Like, the Jedi Council obviously has some problems, but maybe they could be fixed instead of burning the whole thing down. But
Yeah.
sometimes it takes a crisis to get people to rethink. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, in episode 1, when he said, like, we think this was a Sith Lord, and I think it was Mace Windu who said, like, if the Sith would have returned, I think we would have noticed. Oh, would you? Because you missed this one completely.
yeah, they're not thinking hard enough.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of sit, and you can kind of parallel it to religion, and they kind of go on with that if you watch the Mandalorian. I'll get to that, but this could be like the first branch off, because when religion started, it was just this. If we're talking Christianity, let's say, it was Catholicism, pretty much, right? Was that the first Christian?
There was
What was the
like
first true Christian religion?
there was like first century Christianity, which was more like underground and just basic beliefs. But then what emerged a few hundred years later was probably, like, the Catholic Church is probably one of the first large organizations of it. But I even think it had evolved a little bit and changed a little bit from what it started as. And I'm sure
Oh
the
yeah,
Jedi Council didn't start the way they're presented here, because I mean, they just have in their way this routine.
and that's parallels with, this is how it is with the how, let's say, the Catholic Church started, and this is how it always is going to be, and then finally a few people are like, it's, I'm not exactly on with this. I like most of this, but what if we do this instead? No, that's wrong. And then it's like, well, we think it's right, so we're going over here and we're going to do this. And then things start happening, and then come to 2023, and we've got 278 different denominations all saying pretty much the same thing with a few twists here and there. And just because of those few twists, we all got to battle each other. But
Yeah, where's the Jedi denominations?
so this could be the start of that. And during the Mandalorian, you're seeing that as well with the Mandalorians. They pretty much have the same thing that the Jedi do. They have the Mandalorian temple and everything like that in their own world. But then it started splitting off, and it's like, the main character follows a crew where you don't take your mask off ever. And but he meets up with other Mandalorians who do take off their masks. They're just like, okay, battle's over, let's have a drink, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, and they call his way of, the old way of not take your mask off, they always refer to him as a cult.
So yeah, they're kind of playing with that in when it comes with the Jedi going through the 6 stories, and then with the Mandalorian as well.
Yeah, interesting.
You should watch some of those.
Yeah, I have not watched any of those yet. I need to. I've heard good things. Tell me your thoughts on Phantom Menace. Any scenes that stuck out? Things you liked? Things you didn't like?
It's been what, 99, almost 30 years now since it's come out. Jeez,
25
years. That's crazy. When it first came out, I was super excited about it because, like I said, it was the first Star Wars movie in a while. And I think over the years, when I look back at it, I thought, like, some dialogue is kind of bad in parts. And the acting wasn't fantastic. I thought, Liam Neeson is always good. Ewan McGregor is always good. Ian McDiarmid, who plays Palpatine, is always good. But the writing for some of the dialogue was kind of corny, kind of cheesy. And I know Star Wars isn't known for its fantastic writing and acting. But when you look back at it, there's just some scenes that are just like, oh, man. Nothing against Jake Lloyd. He was a 9-year-old acting in this movie. And you feel bad for this guy now, because to be in a Star Wars movie, for one, is a huge thing. To be 9 years old and playing Anakin Skywalker, I mean, that kind of like ruined his movie career. because that's all anybody ever saw him as at this point. And it got really bad. I don't think he did anything after that.
He got bullied because of this movie.
He did,
because
and
people didn't think he did a good job.
Right. He got bullied, and Ahmad Best, who played Jar Jar Binks, I mean, he thought about suicide because he was getting
Jar Jar?
Yes, because he was getting so much hate mail because of the character that he played. Nobody.
He played it great,
and he did. Now, I'm not.
It was supposed to be an annoying character.
Yes,
and he killed it.
I'm not a big fan of Jar Jar Binks,
but he did. Told.
Exactly. He's just doing what was on the paper. It says to do this. I'm doing this.
And if it was a kid's cartoon, it'd be great, right?
Yeah, and see, that's the other thing about being part of a Star Wars fan community. Nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. They will nitpick and they will find something to gripe about all the time. You cannot please. There's always somebody who's upset.
People are still angry about Ewoks.
Really?
Right.
Which
I got no problem with Ewoks.
They saved the rebellion. If they weren't there, we would have
everybody
lost.
died. Right. And the thing is, like with me, when I saw the movie, I was 20 years old, right? So yeah, Jar Jar wasn't my favorite character, but there are a lot of kids who went and saw this movie and they absolutely loved him. And that's the whole point of that character. It was, you got to remember, these were kid movies. These were made for children. They're made for everybody, but he wanted to appeal to everybody. So if you're just appealing to the audience that was, a kid when the first ones came out, you're going to have to make it more darker, more serious, which eventually he did a little bit. But you've got to kind of keep that in mind, that this is made for everybody. And that's what the Jar Jar character was representing. He wasn't my favorite, but I didn't absolutely hate him, where it's like, I hate Ahmad Best for it.
He may have been in it a little bit too much, but
you notice as the movies go on, they cut his parts out.
Yeah, he's got like one line in the second one. I don't even know if he talks in the third one. He might say, "Excuse me," or something.
He says a couple things in the, I think he has one scene in the third one. And it's at the very end, and all he's doing is walking at Padme's funeral. He doesn't say a word. Huh. But I thought the pod racing scene was spectacular. The lightsaber duels blew my mind. Seeing them, because you're used to these real slow, and now you got these guys just that was fun. I wasn't sure what to make of the midichlorians when they mentioned that's how we know about the Force. I was like, I always picture the Force as just being, like Obi-Wan said, an energy field that surrounds us, and they've figured out ways to manipulate it. And now you find out that these little microorganisms in your cells, the more that you have, the more in tune with the Force you are. And it's like, it just seems like it lost a little bit of its magic when that was put in.
It feels like he was trying to come up with a natural way to explain the Force, or explain it through science or something. Whereas before, it was almost like God, a little less personal. But the Force had a will. And so that's different than just an impersonal force that you can tap into. If the Force has a will, it's almost like it's some kind of sentient being, or it has something it cares about and is working towards. Well, that's kind of like an Eastern understanding of God. And that was interesting. But then now we find out, it is actually like a parasite or a symbiote. Basically a symbiote, right? It's venom.
Right. Yeah. I think it was just a way to measure how some people can use the Force and why some people can't. The more you have,
got a lot of crap over the years from Star Trek fans about how Star Trek is all scientific and Star Wars is
just do what you want to do.
Well, let me throw some science in there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no rules in Star Wars with what you can do, and there's rules in Star Trek. So
here's the problem with Episode 1, and I will say the prequels. Two major issues. One, George Lucas was CGI crazy.
Yes. It was like watching a cartoon.
A little too early to go CGI crazy. I mean, even now, you look at some of the Marvel movies, and sometimes it's a little bit rough, you know? And we're talking, 25 years later.
Yeah.
So I think he went a little bit far with that. I think he could have cut back on it. Two, and this is the same issue with the original trilogy, and he made up for it with the next two. George Lucas is a genius when it comes to producing and directing action scenes and things like that. He cannot pull an acting performance out of a person to save anything.
No.
He cannot direct people to act. So that was Jake Lloyd's problem. Was he was a 9-year-old kid. He doesn't know how to act.
Yeah.
He's just learning how to pay attention. It's just he probably still looking at the camera and stuff. He's 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He needs some direction. And
Yeah.
you're making him the star of the biggest movie in 20 years. This is the movie everyone's been waiting for. We saw it as kids, we're adults, we're waiting for this. And you're making a 9-year-old kid who all he did before that was that stupid Jingle All the Way movie with Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
And I think he was in it for like 5 minutes going, I went to it. He didn't know how to act. He needed a director who could pull acting performances out of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, look at Natalie Portman, multiple time Oscar nominee. She is an amazing actress. And if you saw her in the movie called The Professional in America or Leon overseas, she's amazing in that movie. And she's like 12 when she's doing this. Now she's, what was she, 18, 19 when she did this
18 or
movie?
19, yeah.
Yeah. She has so much more experience. She's done some great movies. Another movie she was great in was Beautiful Girls. She's an amazing actress. And in this movie, she's just walking around like she's bored.
Like a cardboard cutout. Just.
She's like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Wooden acting.
Look at me.
Keira
Keira Knightley acted better than she.
Yeah.
I didn't even know she was in this movie.
I know, right?
For a long time, because I thought that was Natalie Portman, and then I saw her name, and I was like, "What? She's in that movie?"
Real quick scene.
But that's the problem. Is George Lucas? Unfortunately, the guy's, like I said, he's a genius. He can produce the crap out of movies. He can direct action sequences,
storytelling.
Do not try to get him to make people act, because he's just not going to be able to do it.
I read his biography, and it was mentioned time and time again in his own words. Like when he sits down to write a movie, he hates first of all, he hates to write scripts. Like he can write down his stories. He'll get that done. And then he passes it on to someone else to write the screenplay. And he also said how much he dislikes directing. He hates directing. He doesn't have the patience to work with actors.
Why did he do both of those things here?
Because he directed the first Star Wars movie, and it actually put him in the hospital for stress.
Wow.
Yeah, he had to go to the hospital because he was so much under stress because he was trying to produce it. He was trying to direct it. He's overseeing all the special effects. He made a new special effects company specifically for Star Wars, Industrial Light and Magic. All this stuff on his plate, and it put him in the hospital. So that's why he allowed Irvin Kershner to do Empire Strikes Back.
Best move ever.
Exactly. And he also let somebody else, Richard Marquand, directed Jedi. But Lucas was pretty much staring over Marquand's shoulder the entire time. But when he came to this, because it was such a big movie, and he's so hands-on and he wants that control, he directed it. And he hates it. So I don't know why he did it. He directed all 3 of those movies too. And it's like, he should have passed it off to someone else. He wanted Spielberg to do it, but Spielberg's part of the Directors Guild, and Lucas is not part of the Directors Guild. So they couldn't work that out.
Yeah, that's probably the toughest part, is he probably couldn't get a director.
Yeah, because he's not part of the guild.
Unfortunately.
I thought it would have been a really hard challenge for an actor. I watched the behind the scenes on this movie, and when they're talking to a CGI character, half the time they're basically talking to like a broom
with a head on it.
Of a broom, and you look here and pretend it's alive.
Yeah.
And you're acting against that. My understanding is Jar Jar was an actor in a costume, but I've seen some other clips where they're acting against like a broom head or something. And that would take the life out of acting. I think it would be very difficult.
Yeah.
That's where you need a director who can see, okay, you know what? You're not emoting enough. You're not,
Yeah.
this guy just told you a joke. All right. And you went, no, give me a good laugh. It was a funny joke. All right. Let's try that again. Take 2, take 7, take 19, if need be. This is the biggest movie
Ever.
in the past 20, 25 years. Let's try to
This
make
does
it
have
good.
shockingly bad acting.
It does.
I enjoy being in the universe,
And like Drew
but
said,
it's like, wow.
Liam Neeson, great actor. He knows how to act. All right. Ewan McGregor, great actor. But they had been acting for multiple years. Your main characters were a 9-year-old kid who had one other credit on his account, and Natalie Portman, who has proven to be a good actress, but I think she's still at that point, being young.
Mhm.
She needed that director to pull that acting performance out of her.
Yeah.
It just wasn't there.
Part of the reason also I think he directed is because he sees, the whole movie is done on a green screen. And like you just said, that's hard to do when you're acting with something that you cannot see. I don't know what my surroundings look like. I don't know what this guy looks like. Lucas sees all this in his head. So I think that's why he wanted to direct it, so he can tell them, well, you're looking at this and this is it. But because he is so impatient, he doesn't get the words across. Harrison Ford, I saw an interview. He was talking about reading the script of Star Wars, and they're acting out a scene, and he's not delivering the line the right way. And all Lucas could say was, it's right here. Just do that. And Harrison Ford goes, well, sometimes you can't just do that. You have to see it. And he could not explain what he's seeing in his head so well that the actors I don't know how to react to this. What am I supposed to be reacting to? Well, it's on the paper.
Get him to emote?
Yeah, it's like, it's on the paper. Just right there. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. So
do that.
Yeah, that's the job of a director. Like anyone can just stand there and read the lines, but like feeling and conveying certain emotion.
Lucas can't.
That's the job of the director.
Right. And he cannot express what it is I'm seeing and what I want you to do. He just thinks that, well, I get it. Why don't you get it?
And that's tough to do as an adult. So that's why, there are only a handful of actors or directors out there that can really pull good performances out of kids, or very, very few kids that can just show up at the age of 8, 9 years old and have that in them. You know? But if you have a director that can pull it out of them.
Well, like Spielberg could do it with kids. Rob Reiner was able to do it with Stand By Me. To get that emotion from these kid actors. And that's what this movie, like Doug said, needed.
Richard Donner, Goonies.
Richard Donner could have done it. But
I talked about this at a podcast a few weeks ago, Corey Feldman, one of the more popular actors in the 80s, had 2 good movies, and we just named it both. With 2 good directors.
Yeah.
The rest of his movies, he was Corey Feldman. God love him. Loved a lot of his movies, but he was just Corey Feldman. Yeah.
So, Doug's exactly right, though. They needed a director that could work with kids and not just say faster, more intense for every scene. What do you want me to do here? Faster, more intense. That's it? Okay.
So, it could have been a really good movie.
It's still fun to watch, but...
Yeah. Not Speed Racer, but...
Pod racing.
Pod racing scene. That was awesome. Okay. Yeah. He did not go overboard with CGI on that.
No.
Gave you a lot of cool things with the sand people shooting them and everything, That was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The fight scene with Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and
Darth Maul.
That was perfect.
Yeah. The whole Gungan stuff was a little too much. Like, I felt like I was watching a cartoon sometimes.
Yeah.
That's
where the CGI overload went a little bit too far.
And that's the really good thing about like the original trilogy and even the prequel trilogy is, they use sets and they use models, and the ships and the places looked real. Like you can touch that ship. It's really there. Or you can touch, the location looks real. And with Phantom Menace, it was like, it doesn't look, because the ships look so CG'd or certain things look CG'd, it just didn't feel real. So it didn't have that same feeling that you got when you saw when you watched the other movies.
Yeah.
I felt
And
that
that's what
too.
the new trilogy got right. One of the
Yes.
few things
Yes.
is they didn't go CGI overboard. They had a lot of actors, like that scene in 9 when they're at that Burning Man concert or whatever.
Yeah. Those are
That
extras.
those were all extras and everything, and there was just colors everywhere, and that looked awesome. That
Yeah.
was very cool. But when, like Drew said, when all these Gungans come walking up and all these CGI robots come walking up, it's just like there is nothing
Real.
on this screen that's real.
The grass didn't look
That is
real.
a
Nothing.
cartoon, 100%. Might as well be watching
Might as well just watch the
whatever.
Clone Wars
Yeah.
Yeah,
cartoon. I mean, that's what it
I felt
was.
like that. I felt like this should have just been a Clone Wars movie.
Yeah.
And the second mistake I think they made is I know Lucas said Star Wars are supposed to be kids movies, and he thinks they're all kids movies. I don't think he's quite accurate about like he doesn't understand the reality of the original trilogy, because if you think those are kids movies, I mean, you have a in Empire Strikes Back, you have that creature being cut open and they put Luke Skywalker in
Yeah.
its
Tauntaun.
intestines to keep it warm. Like, do you think that's a kids movie? And then they like cut up that
It was in the
Wampa.
80s.
And in
Cut the
this
arm off.
movie,
Yeah.
like he lowers the age compared to the original trilogy that Phantom Menace is targeted at, it seems. Because with Jar Jar now you're shooting for little kids, in my opinion. And they have this amazing lightsaber duel against Darth Maul, but they're interspersing it with this like toddler cartoon. And so it's really like messing me up. I'm like, this isn't, yeah, Ewoks maybe for kids, but I didn't feel as much like they were for kids when when I watch that movie as an adult. I think, yeah, some of it's weird, but like it's not really a kids movie. But this is a
Yeah.
kids movie, and then you're gonna cut Darth Maul in half right after you tried to make like the little kids laugh and have a yuck fest, and it just keeps going back and forth between awesome tension, yuck fest, awesome tension, yuck fest.
Yeah.
Get the kids to laugh and then cut a guy in half. And I'm like, what is up with the tone? It's like a movie that's like bipolar.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a mistake. Like he should have looked at the original trilogy and been like, okay, this is how much kid stuff I need to dial in there. And this is the nature of the kid stuff. It's not slapstick. And
Yeah.
I think that's where he messed up with this movie, because there was stuff I liked. Like, I know people complain about the plot being dialogue heavy, and I do realize it is really hard to figure out what's going on.
It's all about
But
Senate trials and
yeah,
blockades and
It does get a little
taxation and
political, but
like
that would have been cool in a Disney Plus type story.
Mhm.
yeah.
You could go a
Yeah,
little bit deeper into that. They tried to come up with a bunch of stuff and then stuff it all in a 2-hour movie. I think
Yeah.
yeah,
that
just
hurt that a
simplify it
little.
a little bit. But for the first half of this movie, I was like, oh, I don't remember all this. Like, I like this. This is interesting. And then about halfway through, I was like, wait, I can't figure this out. Like, what? What are they
Yeah.
trying to do? And then I realized they didn't clarify it enough. But there's a cool idea there,
Mhm.
and it was just, I think it was really just Jar Jar. Even the first half of the movie, I was thinking, oh, Jar Jar's not as bad as I remember. But then the second half, I'm trying to get into that lightsaber fight, and
And then you
it
got to go
was
back to
really
Jar Jar.
cool. But every other like every 20 seconds, here's more Jar Jar, and then I was like, no, my memory was correct. Jar Jar kind of ruined the second half.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I was gonna say I think when he thinks about kid movies, he wants to kind of keep it a little lighthearted. The original trilogy, yeah, they cut a tauntaun open and people get their hands cut off, and
My
but
favorite parts.
but there was no blood. If you notice, there's never
Oh,
blood. But he just wanted to keep it light and fun. And when it got to Phantom Menace, he went a little bit more like he could be very serious about trade disputes. Kids aren't getting trade disputes; they don't know what that
no.
means. But then you have you have the comic character of Jar Jar, which even my kids like him. So I think that's where he's like, oh, we'll just keep it light and fun, and you're pretty dialogue heavy. And the other movies were not dialogue heavy. The original trilogy was just they say their lines and they move on. They say the lines and they move on. And there were some long scenes in this movie that just we're in the Senate talking about this stuff. And it's like, oh, come on. Nobody cares. Get out a lightsaber, shoot somebody.
I like that part.
Now,
and they need to make it make more sense, but
my theory on it is you got the original trilogy. You do the first two and you are blowing up. You're killing it and the money's coming in. And then you do the third one. And you got this great story, and if a little trivia in there, the original story had a planet of Wookiees instead of Ewoks, but he couldn't find a bunch of 7-foot dudes running around, so he made them Ewoks and brought in a bunch of little people. Well,
should talk to the NBA.
Then the Ewoks blew up. And all these kids are like, I want more Ewok stuff, and I'm buying all this Ewok stuff. All right, let's make a TV show.
Ewok cartoon.
Watching this. Guess for Brimley and his diabetes. I want to watch more of it. All right, let's make another one. And all of a sudden, George Lucas is like, holy crap, I've got a lot of money because of these little teddy bears that ran around for 10 minutes of the movie, maybe 20. So as soon as he's able to do Star Wars again, he's like, okay, I need something for the kids. Now, here's the difference with the Ewoks. They were there, they were cute, and there was that one scene where Wicked's getting ready to throw that thing, and he hits himself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one slapstick moment.
Yeah. Well, George Lucas took that and multiplied it by 1,000 because that's all Jar Jar did was walk around, trip, spit stuff, just it's like, oh, come on. Because if he would have been somewhat redeemable, maybe a few slapstick moments and just be there for the kids, I think it would have been such a better movie. Because it was just constant. You're trying to watch this, and it's like, Jar Jar, shut up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see the story. You're over here going, blah, blah, blah. Look at me, I'm Jamaican. And it's just so that was the problem. He saw what the Ewoks would do, and he's like, I'm going to take it to here. And then everyone was like, no. And he's like, okay, I'm taking it back down to here. I'll give him 2 lines. So he tried to do something to an extreme, and then he went the other extreme to fix it, and it was just like, I think he just too much too soon.
Dave Filoni,
the tone.
Yeah, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, I have to give them props because in not this last episode of The Mandalorian, the one previously, they did a flashback to find out who saved Grogu from the Jedi Temple during Order 66, and the Jedi shows up and takes Grogu and fights off all these clone troopers and gets him onto a speeder, and they fly through Coruscant, and he gets him onto a ship, and they take off and they go into light speed, and he's the hero, and he saved the day. He saved Grogu, and the actor who played that Jedi was Ahmad Best. So it's like
played Jar Jar,
who was Jar Jar Binks. So Jar Jar saved the day. They gave him that chance to come back. And, we know how you played Jar Jar and you've gotten so much flack over it. Now we're going to put you in this role as a Jedi, and you are going to save Grogu from the Jedi Temple. And it was amazing. Like, when he first came on, I looked at it and I was like, is that Ahmad Best? It's like, that is Ahmad Best. I mean, and he played the role awesome. He's got 2 lightsabers out and he's fighting off all these. And it's like, I'm so happy for him. Like, good job, John.
He's playing a different character, right?
Yes, he's playing a Jedi this time.
Not Jar Jar.
Yeah, he's playing himself.
Not Jar Jar.
You can see his face. He's
playing you see his face. And it's just like, John and Dave, good job. Way to give him that redemption. Way to get him back in there. And now he's just receiving all this praise, and everyone's like, that was so cool that you guys brought him back and let him do that.
That is cool.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, do you recommend Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace?
Yes.
Yes.
Why or why not?
This is this is going to be rough with us. I mean, I'm going to recommend every Star Wars movie. I will. Even the bad ones. There's stories there. There are cool parts to it, and of course, what we're talking about when it comes to faith, positivity, spirituality, things like that. There's always going to be some of that in there. and even when things get stupid in 7, 8, 9, and it's like, where's the story going? Why is it, a lot of it doesn't make sense, but there's still a lot of cool things about it.
Yeah.
So you're always going to be entertained with a Star Wars movie, TV show. There's just so much story to go into with it. So I'm always going to recommend something with Star Wars.
Yep. And I recommend episode 1. Again, like Doug said, it's a lot of fun. Star Wars movies are just fun, and like Doug said, even on the ones that I pretty much like them all, except for I'm not a big fan of the sequel trilogy, really. But there are moments that are really, really cool. But with episode 1, I mean, I love it because it's the starting point of Vader and getting to know why he became who he became, and seeing his story arc from being a 9-year-old to being Darth Vader and getting redeemed, if he got redeemed, because I know we've touched on that before too. But if you can kind of look past some of the CG effects and just look at the story and its building and its setting up everything else, it's a pretty good film. So I would definitely recommend it. It's fun.
And I'm torn on this one. I like the world. There's a lot of stuff I do like about it. Like I said, I was a little more invested in the plot this time, just trying to figure it out because it felt like, a mystery to me. Because you usually kind of know the plot of a Star Wars movie. Big battle,
Yeah.
blow up big weapon, blow up the Death Star. But in this one, I was like, oh, cool, something new. And, that's not really critical to understand in this film. I liked the pod racing a lot. I love the game that came out of this. Episode 1 Pod Racer, that got re-released last year, I think, on Xbox Live. Yeah.
I have it on my PS4 right now.
I do too. I've been playing it. And yeah, in my opinion, it is probably the greatest racing game of all time. I like Burnout too, but it is really... Oh, hold on. I got an error. From Doug. So I love the video game that came out of this. I even liked the Phantom Menace game on PC when I was a kid. And I really liked that last Jedi battle. But the whole kidification of this, the slapstick element, it did prevent me from enjoying it the way I wanted to. And I don't think there's anything here that you need to know. The only thing you need to know is, well, nothing. Maybe you needed to know who Qui-Gon is or something. So I don't know. I think the tone's too uneven. The acting, even though it's bad, I could have overlooked that. But not being able to get into the seriousness of the film with the Jar Jar distraction, I'm going to say weak not recommend. But if you're a big Star Wars fan, you should probably see it. But I'm going to call it unessential. And then I'm going to say my memory is the only prequel you need to see is the third one. And I haven't
that's the best of the three.
The second one for almost 15 years. So
buckle up.
I'm wondering if I'll change my mind.
If you didn't like the slapstick stuff of Jar Jar in 1, it's a little worse in 2 with what they try to do with 3PO during the big battle on Geonosis. You got Jedi fighting battle droids, and I mean all these Jedi there, and you've waited forever to see all these Jedi fight, and they keep throwing in 3PO trying to be a comedian, and it is horrible.
I don't like 3PO in the originals. I did as a kid, but as an adult, I'm like, what?
Well, I know we're going to discuss episode 2 on the next one, so I'll be interested to see on your take on Attack of the Clones.
Well, I'll just say I would not want someone to start the Star Wars movies at episode 1. That's what George Lucas says he wants you to do. Don't do it. You maybe can start at 3, but
I would
you
just
definitely start at
4.
4. But I feel like if I told somebody to watch, I feel like if I told you to watch these and you hadn't seen them at 1, you wouldn't make it to 4. So please don't start with this one. Start with episode 3 or 4. And Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the good thing about that. When you watch the original trilogy and you see how it goes and how good they are, then you go back and watch the prequels and you're thinking, okay, it's not the same quality, but This is just kind of filling in those gaps of what happened and explaining it, and you can enjoy it a little bit more. You're right. If you started at 1 and try to get all the way through it, you're going to go, my God, I can't handle this dialogue. I can't handle this. So, yeah.
And I did feel like it is interesting in this movie to watch the battle at the end were they on Naboo?
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting because I swear that must be the foundation for Wakanda in the Marvel movies. The shields that go up, that is straight out
Mm-hmm.
of Infinity War or Black Panther. So maybe you can see how that influenced future cinema. So it's kind of interesting. All right, guys. Well, thank you. We will be back soon reviewing Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, looking for spiritual themes and hopefully not attacking that movie because my memory's not great of how I felt about it. But
It's not bad, but there's some good parts in it.
all right, well, I guess we will see you guys then.
All right.
Until next time, peace out.
May the force be with you.
Yeah.